Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and in this video we're breaking down The Last of Us. Season 2 episode 4 is packed with Easter eggs, moments from the games, and lots of things to talk about. Revealing not only a new insight to Isaac, we also get a cameo to Peccat. There's also some big action sequences and some major changes to the game. So come with us as we review the episode. As always, future spoilers will be saved for the end in the heavy spoilers section, which will give you a heads up before we hit. For the beginning though, we start off with a flashback to 2018. In our world, we had the release of Infinity War and Black Panther, with your boy walking out the cinema to all the stars. Here, they had the Cordyceps apocalypse and Fedra getting overthrown by rebels. Yay! One of my favourite parts of the show though, is definitely these flashbacks. The first episode of season 1 had a flashback to the 1960s, and this set up the Cordyceps jumping from insects to humans. Episode 2 saw the start of the outbreak, and explain why Joel pretending to be an Atkins saved his life. After that, we got a couple after the outbreak, including the evacuation program in the area that Bill lived in. That was carried out by Fedra, who people are rightly getting Fedra up of. In the game, you constantly see the aftermath of their oppression, and also how people rose up to fight them. There's groups like the Fireflies, whose attacks we saw in the game at the Boston QZ. Turns out Seattle have the WLF, which stands for the Washington Liberation Front. We've actually just done a big video on the history of the Scars that also recounts their war against Fedra. I'll not go through all that again, but it's interesting to see how the roles reverse. Isaac left the group because he didn't align with their values and saw them as being overly oppressive. Fedra didn't understand why people were leaving them because they provided military protection. The wolves were out in the wild and didn't have an army backing them up. However, Fedra took away their rights and basically rationed out their food. In the game, you can even find some Fedra officers dead in a ration truck, much like the one we see in the episode. Due to all the soldiers who got killed in it, I did wonder if this was a nod to that moment. Either way, the truck in the game has fascist spray painted on the side, so you can get how the people felt about Fedra. They were fed up because they never fed ya. Anyway, on the flip side of this, we see Isaac's now wondering why people are leaving the WLF to go live with the Scars. They're seen as savages, all part of a religious cult, and he just doesn't get why.
Why?
But we will talk about it. The wolves and the Scars though, they basically parallel Ellie and Abby and show how a constant cycle of revenge just leads to absolutely nowhere. Throughout the game you collect lots of different notes and see the environmental storytelling that fills in the story of ruined Seattle. This includes the slow reveal of how the wolves overthrew the gang. Here, they've sort of blended a lot of these notes together. In an all-time surprise cameo that I had no idea was in the show, Josh Peck is playing a Fedra soldier, telling the rest of the truck how he's easy on the voters. It's a cruel joke, as the citizens of the QZ have lost all their rights, including the right to vote. So Fedra goons call them voters to belittle them. Isaac then explains the name and why it's an insult. In the present though, he calls the Saraphites the Scars, which in itself's insulting. Obviously, they're called that because of their Glasgow smile scars, which each soldier is given as part of an initiation. This is carried out to remind them that the world is imperfect and filled with ugliness amongst the beauty. Scars is a name that the Saraphites dislike though, which is something we see in the game with Lev.
You think we're gonna see a lot of Scars?
Saraphites.
Where are the Scars attacking next? Saraphites.
The soldier also says how he caught people dishing out pamphlets. Initially, another soldier asks if they're WLF. This is a wildly deep cut Easter egg, as in the game you discover an early WF base of operations. This is hidden inside a pet store called Barco's. Like wolves. They run their operations from there and you find lots of their paraphernalia. Last week, Dina also said how Eugene knew there were multiple groups across the US fighting against the corrupt federal rule. When you find the flyers for the WLF, she mentions how when she was in New Mexico, they had a similar group called the Ravens. So in the game, there's definitely that feeling of dissent, and amongst this you find out they attacked a Fedra checkpoint. There is an office in there, and also a note. It alludes to a turncoat and a spy in the Fedra ranks who ended up helping Isaac. This note actually may have inspired the storyline here, as we don't really learn all that much about Isaac. At this point though, Fedra are clearly in power and filled with bravado, confidence, and acting like they're untouchable. It's a fantastic scene, and the new Fedra agent, he looks slightly uncomfortable. He's clearly wet behind the ears and also not in the joke. Hell, it might even be his first day, which is why Isaac chooses him to get out the truck. Played by Ben Alaz, you might recognize him from the Gilded Age. Is it Alaz or Ahalaz? Anyway, moving on. I think it's such a smart move to have Peck as a cameo because all your attention's on him. Then my jaw dropped when I heard that trademark deep voice and saw Jeffrey Wright playing Isaac. Even though obviously I knew he was in the show as he's in the game, it was brilliant seeing him. In the past, we've had several actors from the game pop up in different roles. For example, Troy Baker was at David's settlement and Ashley Johnson was Ellie's mum. I always felt Isaac was underused in the game though, and even theorized they got him just to use him in the show. It would be a total waste to not have him pop up, and it's great seeing this character expanded upon. The caravan's then held up by a school bus, which I feel like is kind of a symbol of innocence that's now juxtaposed by all the violence that's about to happen. Isaac goes out to calm it down and we can see his name badge. This covers up his surname Dixon, which is what you learn from a note. We also know from the lore that the WLF was initially led by people named Jason and Emma. Their wanted posters line Seattle, and it's possible that this might be the latter, even though she is addressed as Hanrahan. Huge shout outs to Ripski9826 on our trailer video for also pointing out she's played by Alana Ubach. And I apologize, I'm butchering everyone's name today. I'm really sorry. Do you watch the videos for pronunciations or crap Easter eggs? You decide. I initially thought of the phrase hearts in mind though upon seeing this, and that's actually a counterinsurgency tactic used by the military to get the occupied on the occupier's side and stop any insurgency. It was used during the Second Iraq War, but also heavily in Vietnam. Due to the time frame the show starts in, which is 2003, you can kind of make that parallel. Druckmann also made it clear that the game's idea of cycles of violence stems from living in the West Bank before moving out to Israel. His experiences there kind of stem out into the story, and Dina was actually originally Jewish in the game, and you even explored a synagogue at one point. They seem to remove that from the show, but they might address it later on. There is a line about how they don't really know what started things, though they're just kind of locked into this war. You can draw lots of parallels to real life things, and even the characters fall victim to doing things they once hated. The opening is a complete haymaker though, and it kind of speaks to strength in numbers. All the wolves seem like they're unarmed, and I'm guessing even the new guy could potentially kill them. However, they have ideals that people like Isaac gravitate towards. Though little is known about him, we do know he was a former Marine. The military then got shifted to Fedra, and he was basically forced to follow orders he didn't agree with. 15 years has taken its toll, and now he's ready to stand with the people. I love Wright's expression as he tosses the grenades in and then shuts the doors completely blasé. He's now left a corrupt and authoritarian regime to stand up and fight against it. So you could easily tell this story where you see that he's the hero. However, as we keep saying in the Last of Us world, no such things as heroes and villains. No good or bad, just all morally shades of grey. The Last of Us, of course, is all about seeing things from different people's perspectives and understanding why they got there, which is something we'll of course also explore with Abby. In the end, Isaac becomes the thing he swore to destroy, which you could also kind of apply to the path that Ellie's on. Now we do know from the journals that eventually the wolves overran Seattle and Fedra decided to leave. Their leader, Lieutenant Torres, was then killed in the final attack, with the rest of his team massacred at the courthouse. You find the remnants of this in the game, and it happening there has a very symbolic meaning. All the rights and rules they once stripped away have now backfired at the place of judgment. Isaac offers the rookie a choice, but in the end he doesn't really have one. Just in the same way Isaac had to survive by signing up with Fedra, this rookie's now got to do the same thing. It's something that probably happened with a lot of the wolves, which is why there's been so much dissent. In the end, it's a chilling way to start things that once more takes us to the titles. Last week we ended with Ellie's silhouette just there by herself, and I do wonder if at some point the Joel stand-in will get replaced by Dina. We'll talk about their journey more in just a second, but firstly just a quick word from our sponsors. Now this video is sponsored by the DC Studios Showcase podcast, which is available on Max. The new series releases episodes every other Friday, and it covers movies, comic books, and everything a dedicated DC fan needs to know. Whether it's all the updates on Superman from James Gunn, or just the ins and outs of the latest comics, this podcast has got you covered. Hosted by Frankie Smith and Tyler Coates with comic correspondent Coy Jandro, it's your go-to source for the latest DC news. I was really blown away by the Jim Lee episode, which goes into a lot of things behind his work and just in general what it takes to be Jim Lee. You can learn to be Jim Lee too. I did a drawing. get me on a comic book. Now, but honestly, I'm blown away by how good the podcast is, and they have lots of industry experts like him, Sean Gunn, Katie Sackhoff, and a ton of people from the DC family. You can find the DC Studio Showcase on the Max YouTube channel via our QR code or link in the description. If you want to listen to it on the go, then it's also available wherever you get your podcasts. Huge thank you again to the DC Studio Showcase podcast, and go and give them a listen. Turn this video off, mate. It's rubbish. They're much better. Go over there now. Huge thank you again to them though for sponsoring the video. Definitely go check out DC Studio Showcase podcast on Max and go and give it a listen. Thanks. Now from here we cut to Seattle 11 years later. This confirms that the dusty date we saw on Joel's grave last week was indeed 2029. It also means that the Prophet died in 2019, as we did hear last week she died 10 years prior. So just giving you a timeline there. Joining Dina at Weston's pharmacy, we see as they're searching for pain meds. This pharmacy first appeared in the DLC for the first game, Left Behind. It also shows up in The Last of Us Part 2 in Seattle. It was also part of the supermarket section on Dina and Ellie's patrol. That was cut from the show, but it appears to be used here, just like the scenes from Eugene's bunker have kind of been spread across the season. I did wonder if the meds as well, if they were playing on supplements which you used to upgrade your character. Like a lot of areas in the game though, it's been picked clean and you're just left with the dregs. There's some meds though, including one for a yeast infection. I wondered if that was because, you know, yeast carried cordyceps and people might have just thought it's not worth the risk. The first season saw a scientist examine an outbreak at a flower and grain plant in Jakarta. He then explained how the place was the perfect substrate for the cordyceps fungus to thrive. So you would skip out on the yeast a lot. Dina then asks if Ellie's rocking a yeast infection, to which she says not today. The infection moves through yeast and she later gets bit but doesn't die today. So maybe it's like a little bit of clever writing, or maybe I'm just reading too far into it. Have Screen Crush uploaded yet? Go watch them instead. Dina then finds something which we later learn are the pregnancy tests. She was sick last week and is again later on in this episode. But the question is, will these 26-year-old pregnancy tests even be accurate? They usually last about 1 to 3 years, I don't know. Well, I do know because, yeah, she's pregnant and Jesse definitely looked her up. Last week in the tent, she mentioned how she'd gone back to him, which was a new addition for the show. In the game, we didn't actually have that 3-month gap in between, and Ellie and Dina just headed out. So I don't know if it's going to cause extra issues and add more to the love triangle, as in the game, you kind of understood, like, yeah, Dina used to be with Jesse, now she's with Ellie, whereas now it's like she kissed Ellie, but then went back to Jesse, but Ellie, it's more complicated. Dina then says she's going to pee, but judging by the amount of tests she takes, she's going to be like Austin Powers after he wakes up. We then cut to the outside of the pharmacy and get Seattle Day 1 on screen. It's just like the game where each day was marked. I do wonder if this will be a framing device throughout the show, as we do jump about a lot over the same 3 days. Ellie is also waiting on Shimmer. Now in the game, this downtown area they're in is just a big open world section where you can visit multiple places. This includes a bank where you can find Nathan Drake's ring, a WLF base we mentioned earlier, the courthouse, synagogue, and also the music store that pops up later. You also discover the playing card for Dr. Uckman, which was a play on the game's creator. It's a shame that a lot of this was cut, as there are a number of memorable moments. It's pretty much just a side quest though, where you get fuel to open a gate, so watching it I can totally understand why cutting it was necessary. Give us a 20-minute council scene instead! I need more therapy sessions where they lie to the therapist! Isabella Merced is just amazing in this episode though, as she just drops subtle little clues in her acting. As she gets on Shimmer, she acts normal but totally gives away something's up. But as they get going, she looks both happy and terrified at the same time, which is a feeling I'm sure many parents will remember very well. You know what? Twins. Fucking kill me. No, I love them. Wouldn't change a thing. Isabella just smashes it though, and I was kind of a bit meh on Dina in the game, but the show version, yeah, she's my favourite character. They then head to Capitol Hill in search of the WLF. We cut about and also see a dirty stuffed bunny. Just like the giraffe cuddly toys, this symbolises a loss of innocence. We also have a lot of attention to the Pride logos, and in real life, this is a well-known LGBTQ+ area. This is just like the game with the same flags. However, this happened in the game after the school section, which was totally cut out, including Jordan. In case you don't know, they basically get the fuel from the courthouse and then ride out to power up the gates. This then takes them to the Saravina Hotel, which is now the site of a massacre. Turns out Tommy's rolled through and killed one of Abby's allies, Nick. He tortured him and another person, doing the same trick Joel did with the map in Season 1. I did wonder if we get a little nod to that as they ride past the hotel around the 9-minute mark. In the game, Ellie and Dina then continue on Shimmer, and all of a sudden they're rocked by an explosive. A guy called Mike arrives and kills Shimmer before then taking Ellie captive. This is when we catch back up with Jordan, who was also a member of Abby's crew that killed Joel. In the attack, Ellie slices his face, but they change it for the show so she cut Manny's hand instead. Dina then arrives and catches them off guard, and together she and Ellie kill Jordan. They then discover a little risque photo of Leo, which leads them to the news station. But yeah, Tommy had a big hand in a lot of that, and we learned how this was messing up the wolves. Isaac had actually put out an order that meant they had to kill trespassers. So not good, and I was a bit gutted they cut it, because like a never-ending story messed me up. Shimmer just kind of disappears in the episode though, and they leave him as they think it'll be easier to spot. Because of this though, I hope and pray we see the horse again. I miss you, Shimmer. Because obviously though, yeah, he's not in the game beyond this point. As for those characters, it gave Tommy a lot more ruthlessness, but yeah, he's obviously still back at Jackson. Which, yeah, you know, I am in the camp of thinking they've underused Tommy, and I do think it's a shame. I know there's people who are like, I'm glad he's been cut, but for me, it just feels like something's missing that we're not kind of following his path of revenge and being like, oh, it's pretty messed up seeing what's going on here, isn't it? And Ellie's like, well, we're gonna keep going. I'm gonna do the exact same thing. So yeah, it just kind of rubs the character a bit and kind of knocks Tommy down in terms of how I feel he ties into the story. I even wonder if they're gonna give his fight against Manny to Ellie and Dina, as that was a big part of his character too. But moving on. Anyway, Dina's confused as she thought that the area had been bombed. This is a line she also says in the game, but there it's at the downtown area. We know that Fedra actually ordered a carpet bombing of areas outside the QZ, which we heard about in part 1. They also mentioned this in season 1, and it was the first tactic that they used. Also, Dina's then confused by the rainbow flags, and she says the same line in the show as in the game.
What's with all the rainbows?
What's up with all the rainbows?
We mentioned in our episode 2 video how Seth obviously was alive in 2003, where gay people weren't as accepted. It wasn't until 2015 that same-sex marriage became fully equal to that of traditional marriage. There's obviously not the big campaigns for it either, and Ellie is even gay and has no idea what the flag represents. Echoes of the past are here as well, as we see the VW Beetle, which was all the rage at the time. It's here that they also find the tank from the game. The lines here are also almost identical to that.
I've never seen one of these in action.
I've never seen a tank this close.
What is it?
What is it?
Burnt skeletons?
3 burnt skeletons.
Ellie then mentions how the Fedra soldiers probably fought each other after looking at the bodies. It's a callback to Isaac killing the Fedra soldiers, and no doubt he went undercover after this and took down Fedra from the inside. As mentioned in the note in the Fedra truck in the game, an informant is out there, which I think the Isaac story lifts from.
Kind of like those astronauts.
Like Apollo 1.
One of the early moon missions, there was an electrical fire and the astronauts burned up in their capsule.
They're supposed to be the first ones to go to the moon, but they never made it off the launch pad. Burned up in their capsule.
Along with this, Ellie's got a big interest in space, with her room having lots of astronaut posters and pictures of the planet. Dina then sees the TV station tower. As mentioned earlier, they have a big side trek to find out their base. Those big WLF letters spray painted on the dish. Simple that. Dina thinks it's a trap though, to lure people in. This does happen in the game though, but yeah, you're kind of going towards it. However, they do frame things just like the shot in the show. She also mentions how Capitol Hill is clearly clear, as no one came up to them when the tank hatch made the loud bang. Capitol Hill in the game actually had quite a number of infected enemies, and it was some of the best encounters in the game, mainly due to the level being so open and large that you could really get creative with it. Dina also playing things smart to get through the area shows how less reckless she is than Ellie. In our episode 1 breakdown, we discussed how this might be down to her immunity. Obviously, if you can't get infected, you're going to be less cautious in general. Like, Ellie's been bitten about like 4 times altogether at this point, I think, and yeah, she just keeps going because she's like, it doesn't mean anything, just whatever, just keep going. Everyone else though, if they get bit once, death sentence. So you can understand, you know, how over time she'd get cocky and start to ignore all the lessons Joel taught her. Dina, however, is a student of the game from Joel. He had a wealth of experience from the military and also his life scavenging and robbing before Boston, which adds in such a great dynamic. It echoes that of the first season, where Dina's now taking on the cautious role of Joel, whereas Ellie has kind of arrested development. It's here though that they find the Valiant music store. It's one of the best parts of the game, and we get to see Ellie playing guitar and have a touching moment with Dina. What's crazy as well is that this moment is completely missable if you don't explore the area. Some of you played part 2, you might not even seen this scene before. But we are all completionists, aren't we? No, not like that one. As she walks in though, we can see Legend, greatest hits of Bob Marley, and also the Wailers. We then see Ja Rule's Pain is Love, and sadly, I can't quite make out the one to the right of Ja Rule. Maybe we should ask Ja Rule what his thoughts on the outbreak are. All of the music on sale appears to be vinyl though, which is a big hold on. Vinyl is wildly popular now, but back in 2003, it was pretty unheard of for a music store to still be selling it exclusively. I remember a lot of it being in the EDM section for DJs, but that was about it. CDs. Then again, this is a specialist store in Seattle, and that's a hipster heaven, so I'll give you this one. I'll let you guys have this one. Now in the game, you actually see a big Pearl Jam poster upstairs, and we can also see there's one in the show. In the game, Ellie then sits down and plays Future Days first, which is a little reminder of Joel. That's not in the show, but they do have what sounds like some of the notes from the song as she touches the shelves. There's also a poster for Freezer Weasel, which might be a band from the game, but we haven't been able to locate anything. Let me know if you do though. There's also Vesper Twins, and a few others we couldn't make out. We also see Prince Previn's Like Love, and what looks like the soundtrack to The Graduate, which ends with a couple of people running off together, which you could potentially apply to the pair. As Dina walks around, we also see Flies for Halleck and Drops, which is an in-universe band. This is the same band Sarah had on her t-shirt in the game and show. Ellie then picks up the Tears for Fears album Hurting. That has Mad World on it, which you can also apply to the show. The Gary Jules version was also in the Donnie Darko movie around 2003, and it was the UK Christmas #1 in the same year, which wouldn't have been in this universe. Lucky people, can I swap? We then see Ashanti's self-titled as Dina plays with a drum set just like the game. Ellie then finds a guitar in a case, and though the rest are ruined, this has silica gel in it which has allowed it to remain intact. In the game, she then tunes it, which leads into a cool minigame. You could actually play it, and clever people manage to play songs like Enter Sandman on it. Like we get here though, Ellie plays a Haas take on Me.
Talking away. I don't know what I'm to say, I'll say it anyway. I don't know what I'm to say, I'll say it anyway. Today's another day to find you. Today's another day to find you.
What was that?
Now if you cast your mind back to season 1, you might remember that Ellie had a cassette of Aha's greatest hits in her room. In the same episode, the song could be heard after Riley turns on the power at the mall. Take On Me is a total 80s classic which foreshadows the danger looming of the TV tower. In a similar way to how she lost Riley, Ellie's now on a journey that could lead to Dina's death. However, whereas she couldn't save her first kiss, she manages to save Dina by taking the bite. It's a really deep moment and kind of plays off one of her saddest memories and losses. Now in this universe, 80s songs in general always tend to signal danger. If you cast your mind back to season 1, you might remember Bill would play an 80s song if danger was coming. In the game, Ellie mentions the bonfire and Dina says she should have kissed her then. This might refer to the trailer that came out just before the game's launch where she played a cover of True Fate by Blue Monday. This was also hinted at in the Lost Levels that were released alongside the director's cut of the game. Dina then says she'll make them beef jerky and it could refer to this moment.
I did. I remember thinking, who is this string bean girl stealing all the jerky?
I didn't steal that much jerky.
Ellie then leaves the guitar standing up, just like it was on the stand in episode 2. On the podcast, they talked about how Joel seeing it dusty in episode 1 was what broke his heart the most. That was a gift he gave her, and the fact she discarded it showed exactly what she thought of him. However, after seeing him at the porch, it ended up back in her room. So personally, I believe we got an extra scene there that we might see coming down the line. This will be in which Ellie forgives him and the guitar symbolizes she wants to repair things, which is why she stood it up in her room the next day, and also why she stands it up here. Before Abby smashed his head like the like button. We then cut to Isaac and get a Last of Us and Bear crossover. On the left of the hob, you can also see posters about the workers' compensation and also the workers' rights, which are things you actually see at the aquarium. He then gives a monologue about how he used to impress women with his cooking and his love for Morviel cookware. Morviel. Can't pronounce it, I'm butchering it again. Leave a comment below saying, Paul, you are crap. In the end though, I think it's important to focus on the fact that Isaac got exactly what he wanted. It's kind of like a be careful what you wish for thing, which extends to everything. It also kind of reminds me that getting what you want also comes with a cost. Just in the same way that Joel saved Ellie, it ended up costing him more. He lost his life, and I also feel like Ellie found out. They're keeping it tight-lipped on that at the moment, but yeah, I think the pans symbolize that. There's a deeper meaning in the pans. Abby got her revenge though, but I don't feel like it's going to make her happy, and I think if Ellie gets her revenge on Abby, it's going to lead to the same thing. The importance of the pans here is that getting what you want just doesn't always mean you get exactly what you want. Hidden meaning in pans. This is something you can also apply to Isaac, as he got what he wanted, but then the scars rose up. He then became the thing he sought to replace and is now trapped in this endless war. Now this scene is a bit later in the game when you're playing as Abby. You're ordered to the FOB just like the rest of the WLF in the show. They're planning something big and you see Isaac interrogating a scar. There he's wearing the same outfit, which is a nice touch for the show. In the game he's also using a set of screwdrivers and you don't really get to see it. Overall, they just kind of gloss over the interrogation, but here we get it all playing out. And it's really messed up. Like cutting to a naked guy, he's just getting tortured. It's just really intense. I mean, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't go on TV naked like that and then be like, just line up, let Jeffrey Wright hit me with a pan. Be like, at least let me get a semi on first, mate. Now, he forces him to hold out his hand and burns him with one of the pans. However, the Seraphite welcomes it. He sees it as a test of fate and believes he'll live under the Prophet's rule in paradise. Isaac says how there's scars that don't believe the Prophet was a magical being and just a person, but the Seraphite calls them heretics. In the game, we learn how the Prophet's teachings were twisted and warped after her death. I think it kind of also speaks to how people look for reasons and answers in things. When something bad happens, you know, people handle it differently. Some believe something's happening from a higher power, some look to the government, and there's even those that go to conspiracy theories. Everyone has their own path they turn to that gives them a reason to what's going on. And you can't even argue that like one's more valid than the other. You have to remember that to these people, they've been through hell. Their lives have been destroyed. During the outbreak, Seattle was rocked and the infected ran through the streets, which you could very much see as hell coming to Earth. Now, during this time, there was a lower area called Queen Anne that seemed to be protected. Those there believed it was because the Prophet protected them. Thus, they followed her, and again, big breakdown of their history on the channel. Isaac in the end though ordered her execution, and since then she's been made into a martyr. In her death, we learned how the elders had then taken young brides and would rule the roost.
I'm getting the word nonce.
It's a far cry from the egalitarian society we learned the Saraphites had beforehand, which makes some people leave them as well. Isaac and the soldier then argue back and forth about who broke the truce. In the game, you find notes from both that detail how the other's the bad guy. In all honesty though, it just signals the propaganda. We find this from a note by a WF member who ended up joining the Scars. He says that it was the wolves that actually broke the truce, but even then, we don't know if it's reliable. We also learn in the game that the WF soldiers were slaughtered after Seraphite children were killed. Manny says how the kids attacked them first though, and asks Mel what they should do. It really just plays into how far they've fallen though, as they'll now kill kids if they're part of the other side. Isaac even defends doing it though, and we actually saw a personal side of this last week. Now I actually had a couple of comments being like, she wasn't unarmed mate, she had a hammer, they were right to shoot her. But like mate, if an 8-year-old girl came at me with a hammer, I'm pretty sure I can kick that arse in a fight. The score also says that Isaac's going to lose, but Isaac talks about their technological advantages. However, what the scars have is faith and belief. It reminds me of that bit from The Godfather Part 2 when Michael says the Cuban rebels will win. There's been a number of wars where the locals have been severely outmatched, but they've still managed to take hold. And that's what's happening here. People aren't fighting because of orders, they're fighting because of what they truly believe, and because of this, they'll always push further. That's also why people are leaving the WLF, because they just don't have the confidence that they can actually beat the scars. Now, in this scene, Isaac wants to know where they're attacking next, which is slightly different to the torture scene in the game. There he wants to know about their island, which is where all of them live at. There was actually a massive flood that broke off a big part of Seattle, and then since then it's became Scar Island, which I think we see later on in the episode. Either way, while Isaac took over Fedra, he can't take over the Saraphites. They are fiercely loyal, and while he swapped sides, the Saraphites stay a Saraphite. Now, in the game, the guard on duty never really had any feelings about what Isaac was doing. He was just chilling reading a book, but here we have our rookie from earlier who's now a hardline WLF soldier.
Fucking animal.
He's been as brainwashed as the scars though, and now they're just kind of in a lockhead. The WLF soldier also doesn't see the scars as people and that they're just animals. It means there's no chance for a resolution. Isaac sees himself as right, and only by defeating the scars can he survive, while the scars will never give up their holy war. But to him, these aren't citizens, they're just sort of like the voters, and basically a group he can simply put down by othering them. In a note from the federal officer, it also said how the WLF will have to deal with feeding everyone and dealing with the Saraphites. So they're kind of in way over their heads and need to basically wipe them out quickly, which we'll talk about later on. The guy also prays, which is something Lev does too, and you can even get a Saraphite to pray on their knees if you hold them up properly. I couldn't find the exact words for that prayer in the game, but let me know below if you do. Also, that guy lying naked there, probably gonna need some clothes, and maybe he should check out our merch store below. Not only do we have our brand new 2 Cordyceps designs, but we've also just launched a WF inspired shirt. If you buy 2, you get 15% off, and if you buy 3, you get 20. Also got a brand new Galactus one, based off that picture, Saturn eats his son. It's Galactus eating the Silver Surfer, so look smashing in that, mate. We then cut to Ellie and Dina at the TV station, and it's eerily quiet. In this show, you approach it in the day and then clamber your way up to an office window. The layout of the outside of the building's really cool, and it's filled with ledges you can traverse. I do feel like the blood they see outside also comes from the scars, and this then leads them to a broken window. This then allows them to get in, which is what you do in the game. Ellie also insinuates that if they find the WLF that weren't in Jackson, they'll take them out as well. Probably due to them seeing what the WLF did to the kid on the way to Seattle. It kind of juxtaposes how Abby and her gang said they wouldn't hurt anyone else, at least in principle. They did have that dilemma with what they would do if they interrogated someone, but yeah, it kind of just shows how Ellie's not messing around. The inside of the station also looks pretty different, and the pair come across a human pincushion. In the game, this was Leia, but here it's just some random soldier. In the game, Dina puked up when they found Tommy's horse, and there was a lot of bodies around it. However, in the show, her morning sickness is more severe. It's triggered here, and she of course had it last week when she also saw the bodies. Ellie then follows the blood of the Seraphite logo, which says feel her love. This is in the game as well, and it just shows a nice attention to detail. A message of love, written in blood as well, just a fantastic juxtaposition.
You write born to kill on your helmet, and you wear a peace button. What's that supposed to be, some kind of sick joke?
Also made me laugh how Dina says, "What's wrong with Seattle?" as they realize the Saraphites are absolutely psychotic as well, which also possibly plays on this line from the game.
What the fuck is wrong with Seattle?
Everyone in this city's a fucking psycho.
She then grabs a radio, which tips them off to the hospital later. This is a replacement for the radio that's in the theater, which is missing from the show. In the game, you then explore the offices, but the piece is broken pretty quickly. WLF soldiers arrive, and you can overhear what they're saying. One of them wants to cut down the bodies, but the other one wants to secure the building, and they kind of argue back and forth. We also hear how Isaac wants a Scar alive for questioning, but the squad leader doesn't care. He just wants to kill them. In the game, there was a combination of Ellie and Dina being trespassers, and also being thought of as Scars. The trigger-happy soldiers were just ready to shoot anyone there though. I also wonder if there's an issue with Isaac's intel, as the soldiers just keep executing the Scars like we saw last episode. The scared WLF officer dialogue also calls back to a discussion of kids being used, as he says he doesn't care if it's a woman, child or baby, just kill everyone, which again shows how these kids keep getting brought into the war. Just like the game, you then hide behind boxes while trying to take out the soldiers. You can also whittle down their numbers and make a dash for it to escape the building. Whenever I play, I just tend to lob a Molotov as soon as they come in. Also, that's my gameplay for it, yeah? I've been going back through it because I thought, well, I might as well just grab the scenes instead of ripping it from someone else's videos. Had people saying in the comments though, like, I don't think Paul's ever played the game, and I'm like, mate, I fucking that was been my whole life for like years and years. Pandemic, mate, 2020, what do you think I was doing? Just played Last of Us all day, every day. I'm making hour-long videos on this shit. What do you mean? Writing a fucking 20,000 word dissertation on it every single week. What do you mean? Ellie then she tries her best to stealth kill a soldier using a flick knife. This is how she takes people out in the game, but here she can't really do it. The jujitsu lessons just not working out too well. Luckily, Dina's there to save the day once again. Dina shoots a window and then they make a run for it just like the game. It's a heart-pounding sequence in the game as you pass under some destroyed tunnels while everyone's shooting at you. You then run through a door and put a vending machine down as a blockade, but here they have to crawl down through a gap. In the game, you can hear the soldiers moving through the area, searching, and then you notice a clicker. It's like, oh shit. Upon dropping down, the soldiers then enter, and I always throw a bottle to bring out the infected. This thing gives you time to run and get into a carriage. At 31:57, you can also spot a Burger King-like sign. I did wonder if this might be Fast Burger, which we saw in the Left Behind DLC. In the show, we then see as the soldiers drop into the tunnels and spark up a flare. It gives it a really ominous red lighting, just like the game, and I always thought it was one of the creepiest scenes. The added danger here, though, is that we know fire attracts the cordyceps. While the sparkler attracted them in Jackson, the WLF have alerted the horde in the subway. I love how Dina uses her listen mode once again and she counts how many infected there are just like the first episode. It really pays off the setup there, but just gets worse and worse and she just stops counting. In the game and show, they also talk about how the tunnels are supposed to be clear. I just lobbed a brick as soon as I got down there, so I don't have any footage of it because I'm an idiot, yeah, but they do say it. I've played the game enough to say it. I have played the game, I want to make that clear. Honestly though, I can see it just being a case of the people who got sent down there. They saw how scary it was, said, yeah, no infected, yeah mate, it's all clear, just let's get out of here. Everyone's obviously just trying to survive, and I've always taken it as people lying rather than heading into danger. Because who's gonna even go down and check to make sure they're right? As much as I love the game, I actually think this scene improves on it. The horde's just way more terrifying, and there's that real intensity. Once you lock the doors in the game, you're safe, whereas here they just keep coming. However, they do an homage to the source material with the clicker. When you lock the door, one of them bangs against the window, and that's a moment that we get in the episode. There's also skeletons lining the carriages. Kinda horrifying just imagining the people travelling on a train and then getting stuck down there. I always found it so creepy coming across sites like this, as your imagination kinda fills in what happened, and it's always bad. As they drop down, an infected spots them, and you can see his t-shirt says Yakima. This is potentially a nod to Yakima Valley, which is a place in Washington state, which is where this is all set. And they actually skip over a big section and a new infected from the game, in that you go further into the tunnels at one point and even find a prophet artifact. A Scartifact. You then find a soldier with big bad acid burns. Upon going deeper, you come across a new kind of infected known as the Shambler. These gigantic hulking beasts are somewhat between a clicker and a bloater. Able to throw acid spores at you, they're very, very deadly. When they introduced the Stalkers early, I did think we might get these as well. Maybe they'll save them for a future episode, but yeah, to be honest, I did like how they kept up the tension with the Horde. This then leads to them ascending, but they change how they reveal Ellie's immunity. In the game, her mask gets smashed after she gets grabbed by an infected. Now why this is bad is because basically in the game you have spores around their hubs, and if you breathe in too much, then the cordyceps basically infect you. So seeing that with Ellie should be a death sentence. Dina panics and offers to share hers, but Ellie quickly rips hers off and says that she's immune. The Horde then show up, and she doesn't really have time to question it. Anyone else though, like this deep, they'd be coughing and wheezing within a couple of minutes, especially after all that sprinting. Ellie is fine though, and it kind of proves it to Dina, which I always thought was kind of a weak way to do it, because they don't really ever touch on it again. Ellie's like the most important person on Earth. You know, Dina would realize this because she's immune, but it's just kind of like, oh, you're immune. Okay, let's get out of here. And then they just kind of go, well, you are a bit immune anyway. That's pretty fun, but that's the end of it. Here, though, everything's far more intense. Ellie gives her arm and takes the bite, and then they make it through the turnstile. Someone then gets stuck, which plays slightly off the game, in that Ellie's grabbed by a clicker and then Dina comes back and kills it. This thing gets stuck in the door, and that's what jams everything down there. Upon leaving, though, we get Dina being torn up. She stops, and we even get focus on the gun because she knows what she's meant to do. I love how the theatre even has the word sick on the marquee, as Dina's probably wondering if she is. Though you can't make out the sign, this is for the band Sick Habit. This is an in-universe band that Dina talks about at the record store. In the game, the marquee said Cassandra, but the band being here could be setting something up later. Ellie plays a guitar in the back at one point, so potentially it belonged to them. Now this theatre pulls right from the game, and it's where the pair end up making their base. I love Isabella Merced's acting here. As you can tell, she's really divided. And it's easy to put yourself in her shoes. Like, imagine if someone you liked, like me, say I got bit, yeah? You'd struggle over whether to shoot me or not, wouldn't you? It's sort of playing off the Riley scene though, and how Ellie must have also felt in those moments. Ellie also puts out her hand to prove it, which is what she did in season 1 episode 2. Dina then watches her through the night with a gun pointed at her, which is different from the game. There Dina tells her she's pregnant when they arrive and she's completely exhausted. You even have to carry her to the theatre and then she has to rest up.
Ellie,
I think I'm pregnant.
I'm pregnant.
The pair then kiss, and there's definitely a lot of fear, danger, excitement, and feeling like they're finally at their most open and honest together. Dina thought Ellie was gonna die, and thus she just made the most of it, which isn't a scene you get in the game. They climb onto the roof and start up the power. During this you discover the radio, which gives you a better idea of where everyone is. Ellie then explores the theatre and discovers a guitar in the back. Playing Future Days, it again keeps her focused on why she's doing this. Dina announcing her pregnant, you know, it should be a shock to the system. Obviously, you don't want to put anyone like that in danger, but Ellie stays stuck on her path. In this show, it doesn't feel as much of a point of hesitation, and the pair continue without really second guessing things. Dina also brings up the chemical burn like she does in the game.
Chemical burn.
You said it was a burn.
I did it myself.
You did it to yourself?
Dina then talks about how her mother pushed her towards liking boys, but how it never really worked out. Ellie, and probably Joel, they've allowed her to be herself, and that's why the pair are on this quest together. They have a pretty chill morning talking about their past, eating beef jerky, which she cooked up before, pregnancy tests, and so on and so forth. They also talk about their future, which we'll discuss in the spoiler section. However, their happy moments are broken up by the sound of gunfire. Hearing the mention of Nora on the radio, it also gives her location. Racing to the roof, they see the battle between the wolves and Scars raging on. The city is a complete war zone, and they're now heading directly into it. I was actually expecting it to pop up Seattle Day 2 and end the episode, but maybe they'll do that next time. You might also notice the crane and the island broken off over the water. That is Scar Island, and the cranes are what the Scars use to traverse about the city. We then end with Ellie telling Dina to stay, but she says,
Together.
You go. I go.
Anyway, that wraps up the episode, and I feel like the show fully back on track. I even kind of wish that they just kicked off the entry last time riding to Seattle and just kind of talking about the council meeting and how the vote went. Need 5 minutes of therapy scenes where characters just lie so we can figure out how they feel, because it isn't very, very obvious. I'll not bang on about that again though, because I did it enough last week, but I think this was a really stellar entry. It had a great mix of calm moments mixed with intense ones, character development, and just a great progression of the story and the stakes. I also felt like they not only recaptured some of the infected moments really well, they made them better than the game. Lots of the changes here felt like improvements, and overall I really enjoyed it. I just hope they haven't completely scrapped everything with Tommy, as that's such a big thing for the show, and his character in general. So yeah, overall, really excellent entry, and let me know your thoughts as well. Now as for the spoilers section, I'm interested to see how they change things next week. The ending is pretty similar to the game, but going forward, Dina remains behind. Ellie then heads out and ends up getting joined by Jesse. He's rode out from Atlanta, and that's kind of what I'm expecting next week. As of making this, I haven't seen the trailer for next week, so yeah, if he's in that, let me know below. I even wonder if they're even going to skip that day, or maybe even that section. After this, Ellie ends up going to the hospital, and this is currently the base of the wolves. You overhear them moving supplies, and currently mounting up for something big. It turns out this is an assault on Scar Island in which they want to wipe them out for good. In the game, that's what Isaac was interrogating the soldier for, and he basically wanted to find out a way to get there safely. During this time, Abby's gone AWOL though, and Ellie's desperate for where she is. She actually chases Nora deeper into parts of the hospital that are filled with infected and spores. From what we discover, the outbreak happened, and this was basically ground zero for the city. Things got so bad that Federal locked the doors and then blew up all the stairs. No one's been down there since that day, and it's basically nightmare fuel. Ellie chases Nora through and then tortures her for Abby's location. It's really messed up, and she does it in a similar way to how Abby tortured Joel. So it shows how the pair are similar and how she's losing her way. It's a really character defining moment though, and I think it'll be a big thing for the character. I'm also wondering how they're going to integrate the Joel flashbacks, as we do know that, well, from what's in the trailer anyway, that he is going to be back in the show. There is a big section in the game where you kind of have a flashback where you go back in time and see Ellie and Joel's moments together. So that was something I think that the guitar might play into. We might even get the porch scene there. We'll definitely learn about the museum, but yeah, lots of stuff that could be happening that I think will probably fill in some of the blanks. Dina in the game also talks about how her dreams to live on a farm, get some sheep and cows, and basically raise her child with Ellie. That's something they kind of talk about in the theater, and it is something that comes down the line. After Ellie fails in her mission to kill Abby, Abby kind of disappears even more, and yeah, they all go out to live on a big farm, which is lovely. Ellie still gets PTSD flashbacks though, and then Tommy arrives saying he's heard word of where Abby is. He's like, I need you to go, because basically gets messed up by Abby. But I am kind of wondering if the conversation in the theater was teasing towards that. It does end up destroying them, and beyond that, Dina being pregnant also reflects Mel. They haven't mentioned it in the show yet, but Mela is indeed having a kid. So both were dragged into this by people dead set on revenge. And yeah, this stuff all comes with a cost. We will talk about that more going forward though, and let me know all your thoughts below. Please drop a like on the video and drop a comment as well. Did you know that members of the channel also get early access to videos? If you click the join button, you'll get at least one breakdown a week before anyone else. Costs just 99 cents a month, and we've tried to set it where hopefully it's not a lot to you, but if a lot of you do it, means so much to us. If you want to give a bit more and get something back, then we've also got our merch store, t-shirts up on there. And yeah, huge thank you for checking out the video. With that out of the way though, thank you for clicking this. I've been your host Paul, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.